In 1990, the average home in the UK and the US cost roughly 3 times the median salary. Today, in 2026, that number is 7 times in some cities and 12 times in others. That is not "the economy's a bit rough right now." That is a complete restructuring of what adult life costs, happening quietly over 30 years, while everyone just kept telling you to work harder and spend less. Your parents bought a house in their 20s, on one income. Your dad probably had a car, your mom stayed home or worked part-time, and somehow the bills got paid, there was food on the table, and nobody was opening a banking app at 11 at night wondering where the last 2 weeks went. Now, you make significantly more than they did, and you're still checking your account at 11 at night, doing the backwards arithmetic, trying to figure out where it went. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you've already decided the reason is you. That conclusion is the most expensive mistake you're making. Emma and James earn $90,000 between them. 10 years ago, that sentence would have sounded comfortably middle class, the kind of income people imagine solves things. It doesn't feel like that inside their actual life. $1,900 disappears into rent for the flat they need. $1,100 goes to childcare before food even enters the conversation. Student loan deductions shave both paychecks down before the money lands. Utilities climbed, stayed high, and quietly became normal. Insurance renewals rise in amounts just small enough to avoid confrontation and just large enough to slowly suffocate you. By the end of the month, 2 professional salaries feel like maintenance. Adulthood has become a constant exercise in staying in the same place. So you try to compensate. You track spending, you cancel subscriptions, you feel guilty buying coffee, you optimize groceries like you're preparing for an economic collapse, and the numbers barely move. Because the problem was never the lunch. In England, the average home now costs 7.6 times the average annual salary. In 1997, when many of your parents were buying, that ratio was 3 to 4 times. It has doubled in less than 30 years. In London, it's over 10 times. In some American cities, it's worse. In America, the median first-time homebuyer is now 40 years old. In 1981, it was 29. An entire decade disappeared between generations. A decade of renting, a decade of delayed stability, a decade of trying to reach a starting line your parents crossed before they even had children. This is where the shame starts breaking apart a little, because you've probably been treating your financial stress as evidence of personal failure, when a large part of it is mathematical. You are trying to recreate outcomes that were built under completely different conditions, and nobody really explained that to you, because the people who raised you experienced the transition slowly enough that many of them barely noticed it happening. Elizabeth Warren, one of the country's leading bankruptcy experts, identified something called the two-income trap. Her core finding is one of the most counterintuitive things I have ever read about money. Modern two-earner families bring home roughly 75% more than single-earner families did a generation ago. And somehow, they ended up with less discretionary money after fixed costs. More money coming in, less to actually use. The reason is this. The moment a second income arrived in households across the country, fixed costs rose to consume it. When both parents work, you don't just gain a salary, you gain childcare fees, a second commute, quick dinners on late nights, convenience services, the second car you now need. In the UK, Full-time childcare for a child under 2 runs around $15,000 a year across much of the country. In the U.S., it averages between $15,000 and $25,000, depending on the state, with no universal subsidy and no guarantee of a place. And childcare is only one extraction point. The cost of raising a child to 18 in the UK now sits at roughly $250,000 for a couple, $250,000 just to provide a minimum socially acceptable standard of living. So when a raise lands, here's what actually happens. Housing takes its cut first, then debt repayments, then childcare if you have children, then the tax on the second income. By the time the money reaches your hands, a significant portion was already spent, allocated silently, structurally, the moment you earned it. That is not a spending problem. That is a drain built into the architecture of modern life before you arrived. Even understanding all of that, you still feel broke. And that's because there's a psychological layer sitting on top of the economic one, and it works against you with the same efficiency. The first force is lifestyle inflation. Research consistently shows that for every 10% your income rises, spending rises 8 to 10% alongside it. Not because you're reckless, because when you earn more, your brain updates what feels normal. The flat you rent gets slightly nicer. The car gets slightly newer. The holidays get slightly further away from home. None of it feels like splurging. All of it together leaves the same sinking feeling at the end of the month. The second force is comparison, and social media has made this catastrophically worse. Your parents struggled financially too, but they struggled privately. You struggle publicly. Your brain now processes more displays of wealth in 1 week than previous generations processed in years. The kitchen renovation, the Dubai holiday, the day in my life from a 24-year-old entrepreneur explaining passive income beside a car that cost more than your annual rent. You are measuring your actual financial life against everyone else's curated performance of theirs, and you will lose that comparison every single time because you never see their overdraft, their anxiety at 11 p.m., or the credit card they moved that hotel stay to. The third force is avoidance. People who feel anxious about money budget less, track less, automate fewer savings, which guarantees the anxiety compounds. It's the financial equivalent of not going to the doctor because you're afraid of the diagnosis. The fear of knowing keeps you from changing anything. And underneath all of this sits another problem, one almost nobody talks about. You inherited financial beliefs from people surviving a completely different economy. Money goes as fast as it comes. We're not people who get ahead. You work hard and hope for the best. Those beliefs made sense in households where survival was the priority. But beliefs formed in survival mode don't magically disappear when income increases. A lot of people earn adult salaries while emotionally operating from childhood scarcity. You are not weak for that. You might just be navigating the present with a map drawn for somewhere else. Most people will spend 3 hours trying to save $11 at a cheaper supermarket, then spend 0 hours negotiating the salary that determines the next 5 years of their life. Negotiating your current salary up by 10% or moving to a role that pays 15 to 20% more, which remains the most effective salary lever in most industries, returns $4,000 to $8,000 in a single decision. These are not equivalent choices. Every hour you spend agonizing over daily spending is an hour you are not spending on the decisions that actually alter the trajectory. The second place money disappears before you see it is your committed costs. Housing, debt repayments, insurance, the subscriptions running on automatic. If those combined sit above 55% of take-home pay, daily spending discipline is noise. This is Emma and James. Two professional salaries, most of them spoken for before the month starts. You cannot save your way out of that. The only real move is to reduce what drains first, then build from what's left. The third thing is removing the savings decision entirely. The moment your salary lands, something transfers automatically. Pension, ISA, an account you don't monitor. The structural elimination of the opportunity to need it. A lifestyle cannot inflate around money it never sees. And the debt, specifically the highest interest debt, deserves the urgency most people reserve for everything else. Not the smallest balance, not the most emotionally familiar one, the highest rate, because that debt compounds against every other right decision you're making right now. It grows while you sleep. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. None of this requires you to become a more disciplined version of yourself. It requires moving the energy from the decisions that feel important to the ones that actually are. Your parents weren't more disciplined. They didn't have financial wisdom you're missing. They weren't harder workers or better planners. They played a different game. Housing cost 3 times a salary, not 7. One income could sustain a household. Education didn't follow you into your 40s as a debt. The assets that generate wealth hadn't yet been bid out of reach by people who already owned them. You've been playing that same game on a different board, being scored on the old rules, and blaming yourself for not winning. The work now isn't guilt about where you spent last month. It's understanding which costs are structural and attacking those, which habits are quietly bleeding you and changing those, and which beliefs about money you inherited from a version of life that no longer exists, and releasing those. You were handed expectations built for a cheaper world. So tell me, what's the first thing you're going to do differently this week? Put it in the comments. This is We Don't Talk Money, the channel for conversations people are already having privately.